Welcome to the 700 Club. Israel is ramping up air defenses along its northern border. The Jewish state is expecting retaliation after Iran accused Israel of assassinating a top member of its Revolutionary Guard.
Israel's military is just finishing a week-long exercise that included dealing with threats from Iran. CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell has more.
Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz stressed the importance of dealing with Iran prior to his recent trip to Washington, where he met with American military leaders.
Iran continues to accumulate irreversible knowledge and experience in the development, research, production, and operation of advanced centrifuges. It stands just a few weeks away from accumulating fissile material that will be sufficient for a first bomb.
In Washington, Gantz met his U.S. counterpart, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, and urged the U.S. to take the lead when it comes to Iran. According to a statement from his office, Gantz told Austin, "We must act decisively against Iran's mounting regional aggression in a variety of ways. This includes strengthening a practical coalition under U.S. leadership together with regional partners." This was all happening as Israel was planning a large-scale military drill, practicing a potential attack on Iranian nuclear facilities, according to Israeli media reports at the time. According to those reports, the exercise was to take place as part of the ongoing Chariots of Fire military drill. The incoming U.S. military commander in the region was also in Israel discussing the Iranian nuclear threat with Israeli military chiefs. Part of the Iran exercise reportedly included a retaliation scenario involving Iran and allies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Chariots of Fire is currently in its fourth week, with Israeli military units conducting a first-of-its-kind exercise in Cyprus. According to an IDF statement, the goal is to improve the readiness and ability of the IDF to carry out missions deep within enemy territory. Middle East expert Eli Konim says after more than a year of negotiating an updated Iranian nuclear deal, it's time to consider military action against what she calls an axis of evil that includes China and Russia.
It's really time for the Biden administration to put this option back on the table and show this access that the United States will go to the military option if necessary. And we're going to continue to defend our own national security interests as well as our allies in the region.
Meanwhile, as sanctions continue to squeeze Iran, Kohanim says recent protests there go beyond economic woes.
They very quickly turned political, with people in the streets of Iran at the threat of their own lives chanting "Death to Khamenei."
Kohanim says Iranians want their government to be concerned with the welfare of its own citizens instead of trying to rule others. Gordon?
So let's talk about those protests in Iran first. That it seems like the government is not responding. In previous protests, the famous Green Revolution, they actually unleashed snipers against the crowds. Are we expecting another crackdown, or could this really lead to a change in the government in Iran?
Well, you know, I had a talk with a couple of Iranian former expats, and I asked them that same question. Will this lead to a regime change? They said yes. But as you said, you know, this has happened several times in the last few years, and all the way back to 2009 to the Green Revolution. It remains to be seen if it's going to be enough to overthrow the regime. But you can tell throughout the country, Gordon, there's just this deep-seated resentment towards the regime. They're talking actually in some of their chants, you know, their enemy is not America, but their enemy is the regime, because the regime is spending billions of dollars in these nefarious activities all throughout the region, and they want the money to be spent on Iran and not on the Iran's revolution exported all over the region.
Well, that would be a significant development, to say the least, for peace in the Middle East. Let's turn back to Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. He now says Iranian immunity is over. What does he mean by that?
Well, he means, Gordon, is that for decades, Iran has used proxies to attack Israel and Israelis, but it itself has enjoyed an immunity. Proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, they get blamed, but Iran really is the mastermind, sometimes the funder behind many of those attacks. You know, it's been said Iranians, they'll fight to the last Palestinian. They'll fight to the last Syrian or Iraqi or the Yemenite or the Houthis. So what Bennett is trying to say, Gordon, is that those days are over. Iran will not go unpunished for instigating attacks. And you talked about that assassination. That's one example in Tehran, that assassination of an Iranian who Israel believes has been plotting attacks for Israelis around the world. And while Israel won't comment publicly, it's expected it was carried out by the Mossad. And right now, you know, that's part of the war between wars, the shadow war between Israel and Iran that's been going on for decades.
Well, Israel is also warning about the amount of enriched uranium Iran has produced, and it could lead to a nuclear weapon within weeks. So what does the United Nations Atomic Agency say?
Well, the International Atomic Energy Agency is saying there's 15 times more enriched uranium than was allowed in the 2015 nuclear deal. That's about 8,000 pounds of enriched uranium. Some of that is enriched to 60%, just one step away from military grade 90% uranium. Now that Benny Gantz said it could be in a couple of weeks they could have that kind of enriched military-grade uranium, but then you certainly need other things to make a nuclear device. They're also saying that many nuclear residue has been found in other sites other than what the Iran has allowed, and so it all leads up to really a crossroads of what's going to happen with Iran's nuclear program and what Israel may do about it.
Chris, you're our watchman on the wall. How would you encourage us to pray, both for Israel and for what's currently happening inside Iran?
I would pray for these protests, Gordon. I would say that they would have protection. And I would also pray that the United States, that President Biden would speak up for them. A lot of people are asking him that he would do that. Pray for their protection. And as you said, it would change the Middle East. It would actually change the world if the Iranian regime would be overthrown. I would say pray that this evil, wicked regime that is spreading its tentacles around the region and wants to destroy not only Israel, but the U.S., that it would be overthrown.
That would be a great prayer, and that would be a great development. Just imagine Hamas not having the money to wage attacks anymore, Hezbollah out of funds, the Houthis, the proxy wars in Yemen, the drone strikes against Saudi Arabia. Imagine all of that disappearing. That would be a great Middle East. Well, Chris, thanks for the insight. Thanks for the prayer. In other news, families in Uvalde, Texas, are beginning to hold funeral services for 19 school children and 2 teachers killed in last week's attack. John Jessup has more from that on that from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. The first of 21 final goodbyes beginning this week. 2 of the children who were killed were remembered in funeral visitations Monday. Hundreds of people without any personal connection to the victims are showing up to support the devastated community. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice is investigating why police waited more than an hour before moving in to take out the shooter. Also here in Washington, President Biden is pushing a bipartisan group of House and Senate members to take up gun reform. They're set to discuss red flag laws and expanded background checks. Well, turning to the latest on the war in Ukraine, the Biden administration is refusing to send the Ukrainians long-range rockets with the potential to reach Russia, even as Russian forces continue their attack in the eastern Donbas region. Meanwhile, the European Union is taking its strongest step yet to punish Russia. EU leaders agreeing to ban 90% of Russian oil imports over the next 6 months. As the war goes on, Ukrainian wheat trapped in Black Sea ports is contributing to a global food crisis. Well, in western Ukraine, refugees continue to stream out of the country and into neighboring Poland, where they're greeted by Operation Blessing volunteers, helping them make the journey to safety.
Today, we had the opportunity with our OB volunteers to meet a family that had just arrived at the Polish border, and we happened to be on the Ukrainian side when they arrived. And so we were able to guide them in how to go through passport control, leaving Ukraine, and then entering into Poland. We were able to greet them with hygiene products that they needed. They had just left from the Kherson and Nikolaev region, which currently is under fire and Russian occupation in parts of those regions. And so they were just glad to get to safety. So we helped them carry their things. We walked with them through this gate all the way to our Operation Blessing tent, where we helped them sort from there where they were going next. One family was going to Germany, one family was staying in Poland, and one more family was going to the Czech Republic. So all three single moms with their kids, just carrying a lot of stress, but they were so grateful that we could meet them with smiles and help them figure out what was next. One little girl, Margarita, it's her birthday today, which we figured out just in chatting with them in the passport line, and God miraculously even provided a cake for us to be able to celebrate with her on her 4th birthday. So thank you again for being with us as we remain here on the Ukrainian-Polish border to meet people in the name of Jesus and bless them. Thanks to our partners with Operation Blessing. Thank you.
Such important and life-changing work. Gordon?
Thank you goes from that refugee area in Poland all the way to your home if you're a member of the 700 Club. If you're not a member, I encourage you to join. You're helping so many people all around the world when you become a member, whether it's the refugees from Ukraine or providing fresh drinking water in Central America, food for people who are hungry right here in the United States. And you're a part of all of it because a portion of every gift to the 700 Club goes into the work of Operation Blessing. If you're not a member, call us and say, yes, I want to join. 1-800-700-7000. It's just $20 a month, 65 cents a day, and you're joining with tens of thousands of people that say, yes, let's make a difference in the world today.